Hello everyone, welcome to Ocean English Academy IELTS speaking classes. My name is Harshvardhan Vashisht and I'm very excited that you've decided to join us. So in this journey for IELTS speaking, there will be several things which we will be discussing and doubts and tips and tricks. But the first thing which you need to know is what is IELTS speaking and how to prepare for it. So a brief introduction on IELTS speaking. Now IELTS speaking has three parts, part 1, part 2 and part 3. Part 1 is a short introduction round where the examiner asks short questions and you have to quickly answer them. Part 2 is called a cue card as well. So what happens in this is that there is a question and there are several cues, probably 3 or 4, and you have to think on that question for about a minute. So you get a minute to prepare, and when you're preparing, you get a sheet and a pencil on which you can write your notes on, and after a minute you have to speak for up to 2 minutes, and your answer should be based on the question, of course, which has been asked, and you can take help of the cues. Part 3 is a long answer type question round where questions are asked based on the theme on which a question was asked in part 2. So what I mean by this is, for example, let's say that you were asked a question on describe your favorite movie, and there are several cues or hints underneath, and so you answer part 2 for about 2 minutes. Now what will happen in part 3 is that the questions will be based on the theme which has been asked in part 2, in this case movies. So in part 3 there can be questions related to movies, celebrities, actors, actresses, your likes and dislikes about movies, and related themes related to that. So that's about part 3. Now let's quickly discuss what mistakes people usually commit when it comes to speaking. So when it comes to part 1, as I explained before, part 1 is a short answer type round so think of it like a rapid fire round, where the examiner quickly asks the questions. The reason behind it is because IELTS examiners have very short and specific time at their hands, and they don't want to really waste it. So and the questions are very simple in nature as well, related to your personal life. For example, of course, the first question is what's your name, but then they can also ask you questions related to where do you work, or do you work, or are you a student, where do you live, what kind of house is it, do you play something, do you watch movies, do you watch TV, things like that. Now many people they make this mistake, is that they start answering these sort of questions in one word. So that's one thing which you shouldn't do. That's mistake 1, which should never occur. That you should not, and in fact you must not give answers with one word, and your answer should not be very short. So for example, if a person asks, do you like sports? So you shouldn't say yes, or you shouldn't really say yes I do. No, that's not a great approach to attempt part 1. So what you can do is that you can elaborate a little bit, and you can say that yes, I like sports, and one of my favorite sports is cricket or football or table tennis, volleyball, whichever one it may be. And then you can maybe elaborate it a little bit more, that you can say that, well, I used to play or I still play, and things like that. So then you can elaborate it. Mistake 2 is that people, they try to over expand their answers, and in their attempt to over expand their answers, they do not really answer the question itself. Now what do I mean by over expand? So let's take the same question, and the question is, do you like sports? And let's say that there is a person attempting this question, and the person starts off by saying that yes, well, sports is very important for us because it keeps us fit, and it's really necessary, and there are different sorts of sports like cricket and football and they keep on elaborating it. Now what happens in part 1 is, as I mentioned earlier, that the examiners have a very short amount of time, so it is possible that after a few seconds the examiner may move on to the next question. And if this happens in this scenario, then the person has not answered the question because they were busy elaborating and creating stories. So that's something which you really shouldn't do. So the best approach to attempt part 1 is you answer the question first, and after you've answered it, then you can think of elaborating it. So that's how you need to approach part 1. Now the other problem which can occur, which has happened sometimes with many of our students when they have faced IELTS examiners, is that because there is a very limited time in the hands of examiners, they many times, as I mentioned earlier, that they will interrupt you. And if they interrupt you, people sometimes get nervous, that they think that why has the examiner interrupted us, why has he or she moved on to the next question, was I saying something wrong? So the self-doubt that starts to come into the person's mind, and it's something which is very natural. So let me just take this opportunity to assure you that if this happens, don't feel alarmed. This is completely natural, and you simply also uh, uh, stay calm and composed, and you answer the questions. Now moving on, so part 2, as I mentioned earlier, is your cue card. Now, so part 2 is your cue card. So what happens in part 2 cue card is that uh, sometimes people are unable to speak for 2 minutes. That's the biggest challenge which people face. And there are certain tricks which of course we will discuss in our sessions. But one thing which you need to make sure is that you should speak, you should practice enough to so that you can attempt any kind of question and speak for about a minute and a half. That's really necessary. So even if you can't speak for 2 minutes, at least you are speaking for 1 minute and 30 seconds. That's important. So that's about the major problems which are faced by people when attempting IELTS speaking. Now let's move on to how IELTS is judged. So on your screen you will find that there is a sheet which says public band descriptors. So this is a sheet which is easily available on the internet as well. Now what this sheet is, it shows the parameters on how a person or a candidate is judged, on what parameters you will be judged. And we will discuss in brief about some of these parameters. So there are 4 columns, as you can see. The first one is fluency and coherence. The second one is lexical resource. The third one is grammatical range and accuracy. The fourth column is pronunciation. As you can see, the band score is given on the left hand side with a short column which says band. So we will discuss with 6 bands and above. So when we look at band 6 under the column of fluency and coherence, it says that candidate is willing to speak at length, though may lose coherence at times due to occasional repetition, self-correction or hesitations. And it also says uses a range of connectives and discourse markers but not always appropriately. So what does it actually mean? What it means is that the candidate, that is you, are you are able to speak at length, but some mistakes are allowed. So it's fine, you can create a few mistakes. So even if you're speaking at length and there are a few errors, you shouldn't really feel too alarmed or too surprised that, oh, I've made some mistakes. And that self-doubt is one of the greatest villains which you have to defeat within yourself, and do not let that come within you. The second column is about lexical resource. Now under it says has a wide enough vocabulary to discuss topics at length and make meaning clear in spite of inappropriacies, generally paraphrases successfully. So lexical resource, well, if you don't understand what lexical resource means, it's just consider it like a fancy term for vocabulary. So lexical resource means that what kind of vocabulary you're using. Now sometimes what happens in IELTS is that many people, not many people, excuse me, some people, they use the words incorrectly. And when that happens, and that this happens because uh, the proper understanding of the word isn't there. And if that happens with you, if you think that, well, I've used a word and I'm not really sure whether I've used it correctly or not, that's also completely fine. Unless there are a lot of those words which you've used, you're still fine and you lie in the band 6 category. Then it also mentions something about paraphrasing. So paraphrasing is a very good technique, something which we will talk in our later uh, episodes or lectures, what paraphrasing is and how to use it. But in short, paraphrasing means that you've just repeated the question, but you've repeated it in your own words. So you've changed the grammar structure, you've used some synonyms, but you're repeating the same message which is there in the question. So that's paraphrasing. So the third is grammatical range and accuracy. It says uses a mix of simple and complex structures but with limited flexibility. May make frequent mistakes with complex structures, though these rarely cause comprehension problems. So when it comes to grammatical range or accuracy, it means that you are able to speak at length, you're able to paraphrase, you're able to use vocabulary, but you should also be able to use different sentence structures or grammar structures, and you can easily mix simple and complex structures together. But in 6 bands, if you're making some errors with grammar, then that's also acceptable. So it's not that difficult, and you are and you if this is your current level, then be assured that at least you're getting 6 bands, and if that's your aim to get around 6.5 bands, well, then that's easily achievable. The fourth column is pronunciation. In pronunciation, it says uses a range of pronunciation features with mixed control, shows some effective use of features, but this is not sustained, can generally be understood throughout, though mispronunciation of individual words or sound reduces clarity at times. Now, many people, when they approach us and they take our classes, one of the doubts which they have is, especially here in India, is accent. So they do not feel confident enough about their accent. So I think this is where you can clarify your if you have this doubt about your accent. So here it means that, understand this, that you're still good to achieve band 6, even band 7, if you have a normal Indian accent. The important thing is that you should be understandable, and that's what's important. So you shouldn't use words in a way where you're not clear enough so that the other person is unable to understand you. That's very important. So make sure that your enunciation of words is clear. The other thing which you need to keep in mind when it comes to pronunciation is that you shouldn't mispronounce the words. Now, of course, as we've seen in the other columns as well, some leeway is given, so there is room for error, but make sure there aren't too many errors, otherwise you'll fall down. And that's about band 6. So if you read on along further, you will find that band 7 is also not so far or even so different. Now, if you want to get good, if your aim is to get 7 bands or above, so in 7 bands you have to do all these things, but the only difference is that there should be more complex structures which you should use. The word should be, the vocabulary that is that you have chosen to use in your answers should be more topic specific and shouldn't be general. So one example which I always give to student is that For example, let's say you're speaking on food, and the question is that you've been asked that, well, talk about a party which you've attended, or talk about a time when you tasted some dish or something. So you're saying that, well, I went to or visited a place, and the food was good. So this is general vocabulary, because you've used the word food was good. That's instead, what you can do is that you can use a topic specific word in this case, and you can say food was delicious, because delicious is a topic specific word related only to food in this case. And that's something which you need to keep in mind while speaking. So topic specific words are required. Do not use general words for 7 bands and above. Increase the usage of simple and complex sentences. That means that there should be more complex sentences alongside simple and compound sentences. Also, the number of errors should be less. So, but if you're getting discouraged that, well, I make errors while speaking, then you shouldn't be disheartened, because it's completely fine. As I mentioned, the number of errors should be less. It never says in this public band descriptors that there should be no errors. So errors and mistakes are allowed. Oh, the only thing which you need to keep in mind is that you should be fluent enough. You're using topic specific words. You're coherent enough. That means that you're understandable and your ideas are connected to each other, and you're not speaking here and there, and that you've also, of course, have answered the question. So that's 7 bands, and you can read further for 8 and 9. It's not so difficult, and I hope this helps. So now that we have discussed what IELTS speaking is and how it is judged, let me give you a brief explanation on how this course is designed for you. So what we've done is that we've created a list of questions. This is a very long list which you will find in your further lectures. So list of questions. Now these are the questions on which are commonly asked in IELTS or have been asked in IELTS, and there's a good chance that similar kinds of questions would be asked in future. So what you can do is that, so what we have done in fact is that we have created the list of these questions, and we've observed and found that there is an underlying theme of words which you can use when attempting these questions. So what I mean by this is that there are certain kind of words and vocabularies which you can, if you're smart enough, and we will make you smart enough, that you will be able to use these words so that you can include them in most of the answers which you're giving in IELTS. And so these themes are based on certain the vocabulary is based on certain themes such as emotions, personality, places, buildings, clothes, regular objects, food, and so on and so forth. So the idea is that once you are armed with such vocabulary, you can use these words in different scenarios and different questions. And I'll give you an example for it. For example, so let's say the question is, talk about a time when someone apologized to you. Now, it's a specific question. Now, imagine that you're talking about a person, of course, because you have to talk about a person, because that person has apologized to you. So what you can do is that if you have vocabulary related to personality, you can take about 10, 15 or 20 seconds to describe what kind of person that person is who has apologized to you. In fact, what you can also do is that you can describe what kind of person you are. So if you're not a person who accepts apology easily, or if you're a person who forgives people easily, so you can use some of these words and include in this answer, in your answer. So the other way how you can use such kind of words is, for example, if the question, let's say now this time, is describe a party which you attended and you liked. Now, since you're describing a party which you attended and you liked, what you can also again do is that you can describe the people present in that party. And when you're describing people, once again, you can use the vocabulary related to personality and add it in it. And that would make your job easier, and you will be able to speak at length. So that's what we've done with this course. We have collected certain themes which you can use in different scenarios and different questions, so that you can extend your answers and you can use topic specific vocabulary, or at least you can make your answer look like you're using topic specific vocabulary. So make sure you tune in to the next lecture really quickly. Thank you.